Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence. Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. I am here today with Giverny Reid. Giv, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me.
I know you only as Giv, and you said that I have to call you Giverny at least once because it'll make your mum happy.
Yeah. Should be very happy with that.
Shout out to mum if she's listening. So for those of you that don't know Giv, Giv is director and founder at creative property marketing firm And Only. Prior to that, she was the creative and marketing director at Crown Group for well over a decade, where we crossed paths, Giv. In 2022, she snagged the title of Marketer of the Year from realestate.com.au, which we're laughing off air. She said she literally snagged it because she was almost in labour on the way to the hospital.
I was on the way to the hospital.
That's a great story. She's also been a finalist in the B&T Under 30 design category and many more accolades across your very impressive career, Giv. So wanted to get you onto the pod today to have a discussion around building demand and marketing in high-end markets. Like, you've obviously got so much experience working in high-end property, but I think your experience is also broader than that. So I think it's a niche area, but a really important one and a growing one, I think is fair to say. So in terms of, I guess, where to start and frame the conversation, like, what sets high-end markets like property and luxury goods apart from, I guess, mass market consumer segments, and what have you seen working in the space over the years, and what your learnings have been?
It's a really good question, and it's one that can kind of also somewhat blur between the lines, because at the end of the day, property still a multi-million-dollar decision versus a Birkin that's 30, 50K and growing in value. Both are assets, they're commodity products, but they essentially do the same things, whereby they sell a sense of status, a sense of belonging, and I guess overall like that desire. So luxury, when you talk about either or, isn't it about a need? It's more or less about a craving and a sense of longing. And I guess our role as marketers when it comes to marketing is creating that story, which kind of captivates exclusivity, opulence, and I guess the overall, word FOMO as well. So we are essentially pioneers in creating, I guess, a blend of substance and story, which engages our consumers to want something that's not particularly easy to obtain. And it makes it quite challenging at the best of times, but it's definitely an exciting process and journey to kind of work with in crafting that story, whether it be through the legacy of the brand as such, and in property's case, a developer, and then ensuring that that's kind of expanded upon in multiple touch points through the marketing journey, and very much elevated to be tailored to our consumers as well for that particular product.
It's so interesting, isn't it? It's kind of, in preparing for the podcast and trying to put my thoughts together, it's in some ways it's not that logical, where I think often as marketers in kind of broader fields, we're marketing to rationality. You have to be price competitive. You don't want to sell on features, you want to sell on benefits, but often we kind of are. That's on the B2C front. On the B2B side, we're still selling rationality, even though a lot of the time the decision makers are making decisions based on, well, I don't want to lose my job if I'm, putting the wrong CRM or the wrong ERP. But luxury is so different, and it's almost the inverse. Like, you're not selling a product, you're selling status, emotion, a feeling, something that's unattainable.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's quite a contrary way of thinking about marketing.
Yeah, you're bang on. Like, luxury isn't logical. It's honestly visceral. Like, the best brands tap into deep-seated emotions and aspirations. And basically they're the trigger points, which again, create that world that you want to be part of.
What are some of those core drivers, like those kind of techniques or themes that are particularly, and I do, despite how I started the conversation, it's not like all of our all of the decisions we make in more simple spaces aren't also driven by emotional drivers and things that aren't completely rational, because the market isn't very rational a lot of the time. But what are some of those key demand drivers, I guess, when it comes to luxury marketing and luxury markets?
Yeah, well, obviously, like the most obvious one would probably be rarity. Rarity feeds desire. If everyone has it, I guess more or less no one wants it.
Yeah.
So making it more difficult to obtain to some extent can make it more desirable.
Yeah.
Again, like I mentioned, and particularly again relating back to property, what we're seeing is reputation is everything. You know, prior to COVID and even like GFC and things like that, we could release more or less one marketing asset and obtain an influx of interested parties and buyers. And we're seeing now that it's less about, okay, this amenity or this incredible development. It's more about who is the developer, how long have they been around for, what is, I guess, their pipeline and strike rate when it comes to actually building and seeing through on the project. And the entire journey is more or less being flipped on its head as a result. So it's quite interesting now for us to pitch as marketers more the focus on the legacy component versus the product being secondary. But at the same time, luxury needs its complete ecosystem. So it's one thing to have a masterfully kind of curated brand and express to our buyers through video and other content creation the craftsmanship, the process and so forth, but we want to also ensure that that is seamlessly applied across all platforms as well, not just around who you're buying from. However, like I'm a little bit off topic, but I don't know if you saw yesterday or the day before TikTok blowing up around revealing all the luxury brands out there and how they're being manufactured in China. And one thing that they're really kind of pushing is the fact that you could more or less obtain the exact same replica handbag or luxury product for a fraction of the price. Everything down to the oils that they use in the leathers and the process and everything. What you are essentially paying for is that brand. And brands like Hermes, again, using a Birkin as an example because of how much it grows in value over time and so forth. But it is more or less the same product. So people are really drawn to brands and being part of, I guess, that brand story as well, more so than the product itself.
It's so true, because it is the ultimate. And I'm definitely not the target market for
Second that.
for much of this, but it is. I think almost that it is so interesting looking from the outside in on this space, and there is, I think it is difficult to mount an argument, even though I can appreciate that something made in Europe and made of these particular materials and whatever else versus something made in Vietnam or China, if it does have the same, materials and effort put into it, there's not a 15x difference, right, between just the actual craftsmanship put into the product itself. But we had Dan Monheit previously of Hard Hat, who's now at Thinkabell, on the podcast recently, and he talked a lot. He was just kind of talking around behavioral psychology and us as marketers, how the different way that we can manipulate might be the wrong word, but use these devices to our benefit. And he talked a lot about the effort bias in across the board, and we see that in this space, right, where you are looking at craftsmanship, and it's the Swiss watch that's made by hand, and it's the story of whatever it might be, the Birkin. I presume the story there is that it's handmade in Europe. That might not be true in Italy, isn't it? Is that right? Jid's kind of nodding. I might have got this right, but it is this kind of.
I don't want to say something in case it's not, because who knows.
But it is looking at the heritage and the handmade nature of these things, and then the provenance, right? Something made in Italy or made in France carries more cash than something that's been made in Vietnam, made in China. When objectively, I think the gap between the two isn't necessarily. Does it justify the 15x, 30x, right? We're talking, there's clearly, as you say, factors at play around brand and storytelling and feeling and expression that allow that price premium to be charged.
I think, yeah, just in a nutshell, legacy and credibility don't just add value to a brand, it defines it. So it's kind of one of those, as you say, what is the key factors that really kind of drive luxury marketing? And it's definitely that, and creating that. And look, there is plenty of brands who haven't got a long history line, or haven't, been passed down by Nonna. I'm going to say it probably wrong and absolutely sound like a flog saying it, but Jacques Mousse, which is a French brand that I think it only came in mid 2000s, has absolutely blown up in the fashion industry. Again, for really creating brand awareness in such a unique and distinctive way, but it feels like the brand's been around for a long time. And then there's other brands where they have been around for a while, such as Loewe, and they basically are trying to use the current market, and particularly a younger market on TikTok, and I guess focusing on products that they could potentially purchase, so that they build up, I guess, this want and this need to obtain more and more of the product over time, and eventually become, brand ambassadors for that brand, which is another kind of, like, I guess, positioning. When you think about legacy, it's not about the brand, it's the people that purchase and what they do for the brand, and they are your referrals. In the property industry, you've got the likes of, Mirvac, who have an incredible referral program, and I guess repeat purchaser buyer kind of situation, where they can launch a project and more than 40% are repeat purchases. And I know that's something that we definitely focused on back at Crown Group days, where we had that loyalty program and that sense of belonging and that sense of community, whilst also kind of attaching itself to a very much VIP experience. And if you were part of that circle, again, it fueled that sense of FOMO and that sense of fear of missing out, definitely.
And you just you do see, whether it's Pasquale Pearls, whether it's Ferrari, high-end brands doing so much more in the real world space.
Yeah.
The VIP events, once in a lifetime experiences, things that can't be purchased, which do attract to the brand and create that scarcity. And it's so interesting. And the thing about this space is it does have this kind of almost contradictory effect, where price elasticity is inverted. Like, typically the cheaper something is, the more of it you sell. But in this space, it's with it, as long as you get the LQ points right, the more expensive something is, you'll actually find you'll sell more units. You don't want to be priced at the same price as the rest of the market for high-end jewelry versus a mid-range piece, or you don't want to be at the same price. If a Birkin you'll sell more Birkins at 30 grand a pop than you would if they were positioned at
But I guess it's being tactical about that as well, because on the flip side, just because it's priced more expensive doesn't necessarily allude to it being prestigious or exclusive or of the same craft. And I think, it's really, really easy to get wrong. There's, as I mentioned, that whole ecosystem around ensuring that both brand strategy, storytelling, experience, and even service is so important. I appreciate we're in a digital and a very tactile world, but once I've purchased something, what's the aftercare like as well, really resonates and really can kind of have, the bigger impression on a consumer long term. Not to mention, as I said, brand ambassadors, and this idea of people referring ongoing, being the biggest golden ticket really when it comes to securing a lead or locking in a deposit as well.
Yeah, it's because I think looking back at your work at Crown and with the team at Crown, there was a real
dream team.
The dream team.
Yeah, I'm just dropping that in.
You can't just call yourself the dream team, Jiv. Someone else has to call you that. I'll run with it. The dream team.
Yeah.
There was such a concerted effort at investing in the brand, and I think a lot of developers at that moment in time were still in that mindset of, we will do all of the marketing on each individual property that we're building, right? And that wasn't the approach you guys took. You guys were very much about, we want to elevate the Crown brand, we want to make it all these things aspirational and and prestigious and carry a certain cachet with it, with the idea being that then when you went to sell a development, you'd be able to charge a price premium and you'd have more kind of demand there. Is that kind of true? And have you found that in the property space, is that a model that is kind of starting to be kind of more commonly followed?
Yeah, absolutely. So funnily enough, with for those, I guess, listening to the podcast, Crown Group was known as a luxury property developer, and it really kind of took, I guess, the leader pole in that several years ago. Of all the project events, now we'd have these events, they'd be 2,000 plus people, you know, budgets of over $1 million, sponsorships, they were quite extravagant, you know, champagne on tap, blah, 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 blah. That was the whole experience. We never ever received a single EOI or a deposit from a customer. People would say, oh my God, like, what the hell, why would you spend so much of your marketing budget? And what we found is it generated so much brand awareness and so much publicity and ongoing, I guess, communication and assets, not only, you know, nationally, but internationally, that we were able to build from that some really successful, I guess, marketing campaigns that people already knew who we were versus, I guess, having no idea. And being one of many was really important for us to obviously have a point of difference. So it's interesting that, yeah, you could spend quite a significant amount around generating an event and something that's very bespoke, but not necessarily generate any leads from it, but it work in its own capacity elsewhere is really quite unique. And now we found that more and more developers are kind of doing it, if not doing it better, whereby, you know, the VIP events are in fact generating EOI deposits because they are really focusing on a smaller group. They're focusing on more of a tailored kind of experience whereby the agents know everything about their clients coming through. They're definitely creating this once in a lifetime money can't buy opportunity because, again, as I said, luxury brands are moving from it being product focused to more experience and aspirational led. There was a really interesting quote that I came across from another incredible marketer from Monogram, Amy. She was writing around, you know, this idea of FOMO is still fundamental and, you know, the major trigger for luxury marketing. But at the same time, the idea of loss and aversion hits 2 times more powerful than the sense of gaining. So it says the pain of losing something feels twice as more powerful as gaining something. So buyers don't fear not having it. They fear regretting the moment they couldn't have it and they missed out as a result. So I think this is a really interesting kind of positioning when it comes to that experience is, you know, walking away and then going, I've said no, or I haven't committed to something, and now as a result I've lost it. I've lost that chance. So we want to create that world where right then and there they're able to lock in a decision and ensure that they aren't going to be in a world of regret.
And you do see that played out so effectively in the luxury space, right? It's like luxury property, it's always scarcity, fear of loss. This is, you know, last one left, it's the only one available. Rolls-Royce with the very limited number of cars being produced every year. They could make more cars if they wanted to and make more money, but that they know the power of the fear of loss and scarcity. I think, you know, once again, it's not my my field of interest, but the Birkin is, you know, highly limited, right? With wait lists and the idea if you don't make a decision, you know, someone else will kind of take your place. And I think people that value those things will act, right, because they want to be in that exclusive club that gives you that kind of access that no one else has.
Absolutely. And it's funny how like those kind of things are still going up in value versus, again, you know, mass marketing and mass kind of commodities. Obviously they still have a purpose and a place and they still hold some sort of value. But yeah, you look at, you know, those landmark areas like Potts Point and Vaucluse and things like that just continue to dominate when it comes to capital gains and things like that. So Yeah.
It's so interesting. What about mistakes? Like, what are some of those mistakes that you have seen clients that you've worked with, or things you've been exposed to in the luxury space that just are like, ugh, really? Like, we're trying to position ourselves over here, and then we're off kind of doing these things over here.
Oh, well, definitely from a creative agency standpoint, overcomplicating. Like, I think at And Only, we're very much, a lot of us appreciate less is more. We often see brands come to us and they've only rebranded 1 or 2 years ago, but they've gone, you know, too complicated, too complex, loud, clunky, all the rest of it. So it's kind of like being self-assured and clear as your brand positioning, but also reflected through your, I guess, your aesthetics and your communication ongoing is really, really important. So we see that happen all the time. Um, I guess, it's incredible and really important to engage the right people and the right teams to sell specifically a project, for example. But you you also need to ensure that everything kind of continues on. So creative agencies, and again, like And Only, we don't want to be seen as just that transactional conversation. We produce a brand, you go off and you think you're going to sell something. We want to be part of the conversations, and we very much want to act like an extension of your team and understand the challenges from the sales team, what the architects are envisaging, how the builders are proceeding, and can we capture that on video and show the craft and process to our consumers and stuff like that. There's again that 360 kind of integration of so many teams that needs to be definitely considered. It can't just be very ad hoc. Otherwise, again, it feels clunky. It feels like there's no consistency, and a lot of things can, honestly, you can spend a whole heap of money and then they just fall to the waste because they aren't, I guess, seeing things through correctly. Digital relies on creative, and creative relies on sales updating us on how they're going with so forth and all the rest of it. And then you need a developer that's actually committed to, wanting to not just take risks, but also back what he's engaged experts to do as well. And again, that's another mistake, is trusting sometimes teams and different, I guess, suppliers in generating the best solution and outcome for, I guess, the brief, more or less. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess in terms of like where we're at, 2025, all marketing just seems to be at this kind of inflection point, right? Where there's so much change on the horizon. Like, what do you with your clients that are most forward facing, or your team members, like, where do you see this space going? Like, what are those trends that we should be thinking about?
I think, honestly, it's such a broad question and there's so many different layers to it. Again, from a property perspective, it's a no-brainer that AI is obviously, and everyone's talking about it, is going to be quite a disruptor in our industry. From a creative standpoint, we've got capacity to create video and I guess more immediate visuals and things like that. We can even generate a logo, but obviously you don't want to do that. I need to very much be a pioneer for the designers out there, like an agency that is able to understand you, your brief, your audience is far greater than AI will ever be, in my view. But it's really interesting to see it, I guess, in the sales capacity, whereby you've got things like chat bots and, I guess, as I mentioned, that ongoing, quick, tailored service that clients want. They want to feel special and they want their questions answered and so forth. And I guess, AI is able to provide that kind of service. Furthermore, you've got obviously the things like VR and augmented reality and stuff like that, very much coming into how we create renders and visuals and, future ideas and customizations. And then following for that, customization. So we're seeing a lot more demand for clients being able to amalgamate or customize interiors and stuff like that as part of the service. Whereas I guess traditionally, it's kind of you buy into what you're given, but we are very much able to personalize the experience as well as the product at the end of the day to suit people's different needs. And even through COVID, naturally, there was demands for things that have never ever been thought of before, from pet spas to Amazon package sanitization rooms. What was the other one I saw the other day? Different gyms now must have saunas, infrared ice baths, and things like that. So there's definitely a lot more of the viral trends kind of coming into the living experiences. And then naturally, obviously, as well, ensuring that projects are centered around amenity, convenience, and that kind of connection, as always, are typically a more in demand and definitely positioned as a luxury product versus something that's slightly, outside of certain zones.
Yeah, because it's such a delicate balance, isn't it? It's kind of a lot of and I think if we're talking outside of property, these brands, Rolex, Louis Vuitton, whatever else, these precede digital, right? They're these heritage brands, and that history and that almost the fact that things haven't changed. It's this kind of the legacy, the provenance of the brand, the craftsmanship, the heritage. It's all these things that in some way are timeless and perpetual. But then it's the reality that so much of the way that we all interact now is online, and it is digital, but digital is kind of temporary, and it's fast paced and it's changing, and often brands are probably dropping their kind of standards when they move into digital. And it's like, well, if you want to engage in TikTok, you have to do it in a way that your brand guidelines are, happy to be stripped away a little bit. So it is this, how does a brand that, you kind of need to move into this space and play here, but equally, how do you do it in a way which doesn't kind of erode, I guess, the you don't want to overexpose the brand, right, and do it in a way that kind of runs contrary to how we feel about luxury brands.
Yeah, I don't think I've actually seen property really, I guess, dominate or be done well in social media spaces and TikTok and stuff. Obviously, fashion brands, again, car brands and so forth have really, shifted the game when it comes to that. You can no longer walk into a Tiffany's jeweler. You can go and try on the items virtually. That's one thing. Again, fashion shows you get to watch live in kind of like a VR capacity, if you may, which is pretty, I guess, unique. There's so much out there in terms of these AI generated images, and you don't know what's real, what is at the moment. That is definitely cutting through in the digital space. But I think immersion is the new flex for luxury, and how we do it. It's definitely shifted from just I guess a website experience to social media, TikTok, and even the crazy lady who literally showcases a product from less than 2 seconds and has generated about $130 million or something crazy in the last month.
We're in the wrong game, Jiv.
Yeah, well, if you're telling me. But there's plenty of it. It's just incredible to see where things are going, but also slightly daunting because it is shifting and evolving so rapidly. Who knows where we'll be. I know my husband, for example, has been dabbling in AI and using AI to recreate himself and kind of play out scripts. And it's really quite difficult to even know what's real and what's not in that capacity. And so, agents, again, from a property perspective, can be in multiple places at any given time if we set up, I guess, the avatars correctly and things like that, which is, it's pretty crazy.
It's interesting stuff. And I think your point's an interesting one around it not necessarily being done well in property, but being done so well in other spaces. And we had Laura Roberts, who heads up Invent, out here on the pod back end of last year, I think it was, and she was very bullish on that kind of big brand, luxury brand, metaverse. She talked around, I think it was Ferrari being the case study during COVID when cars couldn't be test driven, but actually kind of creating that experience in a kind of an augmented reality kind of setup. And it is interesting your point around fashion shows online and whatever else, but maybe that's the I don't know if that's because the property purchase is just such a big one in terms of that emotional pull, or whether the you haven't just nailed it, Jiv, and you've got some technology that you need to roll out to take to your clients.
Definitely think me and many other property marketers out there's a huge job out there. Having said that, like I said, the renders and the motion and animation component is incredible. There's some amazing things being done in the property space there, and again, it looks like the real deal. But I think from a unique immersion or something that's a little bit more viral or on trend with things, I don't think property is. And you've nailed it. I don't think it necessarily needs to, because it is such a different and such a much more emotional purchase that requires now more months, more touch points, more I guess one-on-one, face-to-face kind of conversations. It also involves more people. It's it's no longer just the sole decision or the husband and wife. It's going through the family. It's checking through friends and researching, as I said, about the developers and stuff like that. That process is a lot more time consuming this time. So yeah, something that's 30 seconds on TikTok, I don't think is necessarily going to be the decision factor for property. Having said that, we've had great success with clients using video, obviously, as a driver to be transparent on, the build, the process, what your construction team is doing, what the agent is saying about the area, and there are elements, of course.
Feels appropriate. Jiv, it's been awesome having you on the pod to talk around kind of high-end markets. We finished the pod with the same question, which is, what's the best bit of career advice that you'd give to an in-house marketer?
Oh,
Go on, Jiv. You've got so much experience. You've sat on both sides of the fence.
I think it comes from having started just and only recently, and it's like, if your gut's telling you to do something and you've got imposter syndrome, all the rest of it, you've just got to take a chance and at least know that you've tried and you've given it a good leap, because it could be the best decision in the world. And hands down, working with my team has just been the best thing I've done. It's probably
it's Dream Team 2.0.
Yeah, Dream Team 2.0. Yeah, for sure.
I think that's both of. I think, like, for me, I think the gut is probably something we should listen to more. And I think the other thing is, take the leap, right? I think you got to back yourself, and I think everyone has imposter syndrome.
Oh,
if you don't have imposter syndrome, you probably have some real issues.
And that, no, for sure. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, James. It's been awesome.
Thanks,
it was really
Jiv.
good to catch up.